Well, now I would like to bring in Carlos Alzugaray. He's a professor of international relations at the University of Havana and Cuba's former ambassador to Brussels. Welcome to our broadcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here with you.
You just heard our reporter there say that Raul Castro would like to stay away from returning to capitalism. With that in mind, it has been 5 years since the Congress met and discussed the economy, the housing shortage, wages. How much will the normalizing of relations with the U.S. affect all of these issues?
Well, the normalization of relations with the United States is certainly a powerful boost for the government, because the government achieved something that had been elusive for a long time. Now, if and when the embargo is lifted, it certainly will help the Cuban economy. And by the same token, it would facilitate the reforms. It's true that the reform process faces the obstacle of a very difficult international financial and economic situation for Cuba, which in part is due to the American sanctions on Cuba. So I think that if this goes on, and frankly speaking, it's tough, it's not very easy, but we're looking at some important changes, then probably the government can push the reform process even further. For example, the unification of the currency depends a lot on how sound is the economy. Now, it is calculated by Cuban economists that a lifting of the embargo will mean a 2% increase in the GDP growth of Cuba. So I think these are the elements that make us think that if the normalization of relations continues to go ahead, it will have a positive impact in the reform process in Cuba.
But wouldn't you say that it's expected by normalizing these relations that Cuba will eventually return to will become a capitalist society, I should say?
No, I don't think so. I think that what the government wants and what the people want is a system that incorporates a private sector, and I think I am a defender of the incorporation of a private sector. Right now, the private sector has about 30% of the jobs that are created in Cuba are created by the private sector. So it is important for everyday life that we have a private sector that can continue to prosper, and that's a reality. The private sector is prospering. The government needs to streamline the state and needs to streamline the state-owned companies. So I think this doesn't mean an embrace of capitalism. I would say that it would be more of a mixed economy in which the main things that we have from socialism, which is the social safety net, the education, the public health, are maintained. I think this is the purpose. No matter how you call it, I would like to call it a mixed economy. I don't think Cuba is going to go to capitalism, because capitalism in Cuba meant a disaster before the revolution.
Carlos, I just have a second left. Tell me, how will Raul Castro continue to influence Cuba once he steps down in 2 years?
Well, obviously, both him and Fidel Castro have an enormous influence in Cuba. Now, Raul, by the way that he has led Cuba over the last 10 years, it's now 10 years that Raul, since he assumed power, let's say, provisionally and then in full, and he has pushed for this reform that almost everyone agreed that had to be done. So he's going to be there. He's going to be behind the scenes supporting the reformist process. And as you heard from that speech that he was giving today, he's worried about inertia and some clinging to the past. I think Cuba must go past this dichotomy of socialism and capitalism, create an efficient economy using the methods of capitalism for production, but using the methods of socialism for distribution.
Well, Carlos Alzugaray, thank you so much for your time joining us live from Havana. We appreciate it.